I'm feeling a little, anxious, if you know what I mean.
Did Tommy take his pants off?
The word wholesome is not what would readily come to mind when you think about the movie Beetlejuice. I've only ever seen clips of it when I was very little, and I remember in my messed up mind having a crush on Beetlejuice. Yes, I'm crazy. Yes, I'm aware. I had issues, but there was a very good reason for that, albeit a very dark one. But it's about time I sat down and actually watched this movie straight through, and I'm so surprised at how much I actually loved it when I decided to do so. Beetlejuice, directed by Tim Burton, is this unique film that blends dark comedy with fantastical elements, and it creates an experience that's both eerie and endearing. Although looking back at it, it doesn't seem scary at all, but more so whimsical and bizarre. The movie features a charmingly quaint couple, Adam and Barbara Maitland, who are living their best small-town life in their dream house. They feel like introverts, and I can't really blame them because it seems as though they just want to live quietly and away from everyone. Even though they're in a small town, they keep to themselves, and aside from the very annoying, nosy neighbor telling them that their house is too big and that they need a family or that somebody else should have the house, which is way out of line, they're happy. Unfortunately, in movies, good things never last when people are happy, and after a car accident where they swerve off a bridge to avoid hitting a pup, they quickly realize after a while and not knowing how they ended back up at their house, that they're dead. Not only are they ghosts now, but they're stuck in their house for all eternity. Just when they're barely getting used to the idea of being alone in their home, they forget that the real world still goes on and nobody else can see them, and so the house is sold to the Dietzes. The family is as city as they come. The real problem is the artsy mother who has huge plans to completely transform their home into a modern art spectacle. Lydia, their goth daughter, who has a flair for the dramatic and is the embodiment of teenage angst, happens to be the only one who can see the Maitlands. Understandably, these quiet, introverted ghosts want to scare away these annoying city people who are now in their house. But it goes horribly wrong because they're so sweet and introverted that they have no idea how to scare anyone. I mean, even in the most obvious situations where they could be a little bit more intense or just continue doing what they're doing, their introversion gets in the way and they just stand there awkwardly not knowing what to do, and I probably would do the same thing.
I feel so stupid.
Oh, God.
That's when the character for whom the movie is named after, Beetlejuice, introduces himself as a freelance bio-exorcist. He is loud and quirky and mischievous, but the Maitlands need his help to get rid of the living. However, he does have his own agenda and reasons for wanting to help them, which he kind of alludes to. Obviously, because that's how the world works, even in the afterlife, nothing's free. After Beetlejuice wreaks havoc, eventually the movie concludes with the Maitlands and the Dietzes learning to coexist in harmony. Lydia gets the ghostly parental figure she's always wanted, and things don't end well for Beetlejuice. This movie is adorable, because not only is the concept interesting, but I could totally relate. Here you have two introverted people who don't know what to do as ghosts when it comes to exorcising the living out of their home because they're too shy. Every other ghost movie you've seen features ghosts that are louder than life and super intense. Even the very quiet ones start off kind of subtle to mess with people and see what they can get away with, and then they amp it up times 1,000, and they're really creepy and extremely adept at scaring people, despite it being the first time they're haunting someone. So you automatically believe that every ghost has the skill set to haunt people successfully. Beetlejuice shows that that's not the case, and that's where Beetlejuice comes in. The concept and role of Beetlejuice serves as a driving force and narrative tool in the story's progression, and what I found really intriguing, especially upon watching it straight through, is that Beetlejuice wasn't even really the villain. He was mischievous and he had his reasons for doing things, but actually watching the movie, I realized that he did everything he claimed he was going to do. He never lied about anything. Maybe he omitted some things in the beginning, but he never really lied. Him wanting his own agenda or having his own agenda and getting something out of the deal wasn't necessarily a bad thing. You expect people to just help you for free. You're all in the same situation. The Maitlands wanted to scare the people out of their home. And that's exactly what Beetlejuice was accomplishing until they went back on the deal. At most, he was annoying and inappropriate. What did he really do wrong from anyone's perspective? Even when Lydia agrees to marry him as part of a deal for him to return to the land of the living, he doesn't necessarily have any intentions with her and simply wants to exploit the loophole for his own benefit. However, Lydia ultimately reneges on the deal at the last minute. I mean, I can't blame her either, but that's not really Beetlejuice's fault. He tries to quiet everyone so that he can go through with the sham marriage so he can come into the land of the living. From that standpoint, he didn't actually commit any egregious acts. Instead, those who struck a deal with him ended up betraying him for their own purposes, which is kind of ironic. Anyway, his end comes in the form of the Maitlands tricking him, even though he saved them. And he ends up getting eaten by the sandworm and ends up back in the afterlife waiting room, which lets us know when he had put Barbara there, the most that would have happened to her is she would have stayed in the waiting room for a while, which, apparently takes a very long time to get processed again. There were several things I loved about this movie, aside from the set design, costumes, and even the characters. I loved all of it, but the very concept of ghosts being in a situation where the living are imposing upon their way of life or afterlife is something that you don't see all the time. In many modern day movies, it's always the living that are seeing the ghost as an inconvenience. Most movies actually center around that, TV shows too. The fact that Beetlejuice even offers exorcism of the living allows us to see things from the point of view of the dead. Also, seeing the Maitlands trying to navigate through this new afterlife and not knowing how to be dead and trying to explore things through this new lens was very intriguing. I thoroughly enjoyed this concept. The only other thing I've seen do this recently is this show called Ghosts. Imagine ghosts having an existential crisis. What was even more interesting is that they didn't even realize that they were dead right after the accident. I also enjoy the concept of there being total bureaucracy in the afterlife as well. It raises a lot of questions, to be honest, though, such as, does everybody just walk on Earth as ghosts in this universe? Is there no heaven or hell? Does that mean that there are ghosts everywhere? And wouldn't that be awkward if, from what we've seen in the movie, people still maintain their feelings and personalities and they can fall in love with people who are still in the land of the living, like the Maitlands did with Lydia, adopting her as their child? If people were locked to their houses as ghosts, wouldn't that make things very complicated? Example, what if it was a husband or a wife or a couple like the Maitlands, but one of them died, and now the dead partner is confined to the house, and they have to watch if that person decides to stay in the house who's still tied to the living. The dead person has to now watch as time flies by as their partner becomes happy with somebody else and has a life that they can never have again, while still being there watching all of it, like watching your partner screw someone else, get their back blown out, going down, doing the sloppy toppy. Like, it's awkward. It's very, that's a special kind of hell. And you still have all the same feelings you had when you were alive for that person. Do they not have the option to move on? I mean, they do mention in Beetlejuice that there is a true death, and it's when they get exorcised. So if nobody ever exorcises these ghosts, are they just like subject to this kind of emotional torture forever and ever for all eternity? That's really dark and horrific when you think about it. I mean, you have the choice when you're alive to take your life and enter the afterlife, but you don't have a choice in the afterlife to not be in the afterlife at all. There seem to be people down there in the afterlife that don't seem particularly happy with their circumstance, and they would want to truly end it. Do they not have that choice? I love how movies like this cause you to think. It's truly amazing. And after I watched the movie, I was asking myself a bunch of questions and overanalyzing it because it's fun. For example, what is a sandworm? Is it a ghost of another sandworm? Beetlejuice mentioned Saturn. Is a sandworm on Saturn? Is it truly Saturn, or is it the afterlife of Saturn? Or is it just a place called Saturn? I think a movie is truly successful when it can create and build a world that enchants you, but causes you to constantly wonder about all the elements that it doesn't even touch on, but merely introduces even as a peripheral. And then throughout all of this, Beetlejuice is one of the most wholesome movies I've watched for the purpose of its overall theme, which is family. Lydia's father and stepmom exist in their own little world. Lydia feels left out, and even though she's goth, I don't think that she truly feels all doom and gloom, but she more so feels alone. Even when she wants to hang out with her father or tell him something, he wants quiet time away from his family, which I can't really blame the man for. The mother is all about her art and seems to want her daughter to kind of follow in her footsteps or to just fall in line and just stay out the way. I do appreciate that even though the artsy mother is a stepmother, she's not evil, because they always make stepmothers look like they're evil. She just feels like a regular person, but then you have to also consider that this means Lydia lost her mother. This can probably contribute to her becoming goth and feeling alone. Her stepmom is probably drastically different, and so she didn't have a mother figure growing up. To see her get close with the Maitlands, though, and offer them that solace and tethered to the living of warmth and acceptance while they did the same for her, is what really made this film wholesome. The Maitlands realized after Beetlejuice was doing his job to scare away this family that they didn't want this, actually. They wanted Lydia to stay. At the end, it was so beautiful when Barbara said,
Adam, I want to be with Lydia.
Lydia made it worth it for them being in the afterlife. And it was so poetic, the goth girl having ghost parents. It was also wholesome that the Dietzes, after learning that the ghosts were real people and not just subjects that they could make money off of, that they had love and that they were kind and that they were human still, regardless of being dead, that the Dietzes redid the house so it looked how it originally did so that ghosts could feel at home. They were willing to share their home with this new family. And even though this new family knows that the ghosts are still here, they all coexist together as one big family. I've not seen any other movie like this. It's truly enchanting. It's also interesting that Beetlejuice did not really seem to be the center of any of this, but more of a comedic element to push the story along. The story was all about coexisting in family, respecting the dead, those that came before you, a quirky tale of life and death, and the chaotic middle ground, proving that your family or friends can come in the most unexpected forms. How beautiful. I'm so glad I watched this movie, and it will honestly go down as one of the best old movies that I've watched.